This is a story about the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we live out in the world, and the space between those two. It's about how we love, how we lose, and how we recover, or not, through the stories we make up in our heads. I'm Robin Rice, and this is also my story. Chapter 19. Out of the Box. Imagine a box, a story box. Everything in your life fits in this story box, and as time passes, some things fall out, while new things are put in. The new shapes the memories of the old, so that a sense of incongruence does not arise. We can travel through our lives with a box that feels cohesive. Carrying this box, we feel like us to ourselves, and not much changes that feeling. We feel like ourselves even if, upon closer examination, there's not much to support that feeling. All goes well with our story-boxed life until something happens that does not fit, does not match who we assume ourselves to be on the surface. At this juncture, we have a decision to make. Will we accept what we cannot understand? Will we investigate further? Or will we say, well, that was weird, and forget about it? Something happened, and so a new reality sits there right in front of our eyes. But if we deem it impossible, or even if we only believe it to be impossible, then that's what it usually becomes. Impossible. A fluke. We shake our heads, feel incredulous, laugh out loud. But we do not take this impossibility seriously. Anything but that. Without thinking about it, we stick this impossible thing that actually happened into an impossible story box. Everyone has one, trust me. In doing so, nothing has to change. Not our lives, not our thoughts or beliefs, certainly not ourselves. The impossible box is very handy that way. But what happens when we don't do that? When we decide that the impossible could be, might be, has a sliver of a chance to be possible, after all. I cannot count the number of times over the years that I have been explaining something supposedly impossible and stopped to offer this caveat. You must understand, I'm a smart woman. I wouldn't be telling you this if it were not actually true, at least for me. I have to deal with it, even if you have the luxury of dismissing it. Mostly, people either get wide-eyed and say, tell me more, or they stick it into another handy sub-impossibility box, like a box within a box. This one is to be filled with things that might be possible for other people, but not us. Even if they have actually had similar experiences, into the new box it goes. Go figure. I recall a man of science who didn't believe anything irrational except that he once saw a ghost for real. He was intrigued that I had also seen such things, but he said he couldn't change his scientific worldview, and ghosts were impossible, so he decided it didn't happen, even though he knew it did. I shared a few statistics I knew about seeing ghosts. A YouGov survey from 2019 found that 45% of U.S. adults believe in them, and 20% claim to have seen or felt the presence of a ghost. That's 1 in 5 people, I added, just in case he didn't do the math in his head. Interesting, he replied. Too big? Too scary? Too strange? I asked. Yep, he admitted. I watched that man take out his story box. Maybe he called it his fluke box, who knows. A fluke of 1 in 5, but hey, I get it. It's hard to be in the early adopter's chair. Our various story boxes and sub-boxes and sub-sub-boxes allow for all sorts of extraneous things to happen in our lives without rocking our overall story boat. It makes sense. I mean, people have lives to live. They can't be expected to sort this stuff out all day, every day, just because I had to. To make things more complex, any one story can go into multiple boxes. Starving children in Africa, a common thing to see on television when I was a child, was shocking. And so I created a box called Things I Have No Idea What to Do About That I Can't Help, even though the people advertising were showing me a very direct way to help. I also put it in my This Is Not For You box, also the change the TV channel so you don't see this box. I later realized it was also firmly in my Africa is a place of terrible tragedy box, one I am grateful to have unpacked. Today I am able to see the kaleidoscope of beauty and tragedy and far more that is Africa and any country that has some of its inhabitants struggling with food insecurity, including the U.S. Seeing the naturally slim, fabulously beautiful, insanely rich, or supremely gifted on TV created another story box within me, the things that will never be me box. No doubt only one reason I loathe being on camera in any way, shape, or form. When these ill-fitting stories come upon us, our story boxes arise almost instantaneously. It's entirely helpful if you want to float through life. A brilliant plan if you never want to change anything. But what if we decide we do want to change? Can we, for example, find the box within us labeled figments of my imagination and revisit some of our more powerful yet hard-to-explain experiences? How about the boxes called things like rare glimpses or hard to imagine but awesome if true? Here's the secret I have learned. We can unpack any box we want. We can take another look at whatever we have put away. We can consider if an unpacked story might actually expand our self and worldview, our happiness even. We may well be going against the crowd, the culture, the norms, and the expected. We might be rejected, mocked, or banished. Or our worldview might have to change entirely, something never easy to face. But what if the current crowd, culture, norms, and levels of reality are not enough, and maybe never were, for the likes of us, you and me? What if we are of a different ilk? If you are still listening at chapter 19, I have to think there's a decent chance of that. I know of a different ilk raises all kinds of inner red flags like superiority alert, ego complex, and the all too familiar too big for her britches. But what if we dared ditch those boxes too? Or at least consciously created a box called maybe worth considering? What if the impossible being possible feels right and true and good? What if we feel at home with the crazy, the wild, the preposterous? What if we figure out that keeping us afraid of looking stupid has kept us from discovering who we really and truly are? What if the part of us that never changes, the part that tries to stop us, is also, somewhere within, cheering us on in our attempts to allow less and less boxing? What if coloring outside the lines is cause for celebration? Welcome to my world, friends. It's really quite beautiful. Enter the labyrinth. As the weeks turned to months, turned to this is now my life, post-awakening, I was starting to simply know things a lot more. It wasn't precognition so much as in-the-moment cognition. I would simply ask a question, and often before I could finish fully forming it, there would be an answer. The feeling was, I just know. I could not prove what it was, but each time, and with that particular feeling, the answer was correct. Even if the details were more ballpark than exact, at the deeper levels of truth, I could count on these knowings. There were big things on occasion. I could not tell someone if they had cancer, for example, or even where the illness was in their body. The physical was never my gift, at least compared to the mental and metaphysical. But I was pretty good at knowing if someone was about to get a difficult diagnosis. I might not have been able to tell someone when love would arrive at the door, but I could sense if that was to be their path or if that path was over for them. I might not have been able to predict the lottery, but I could understand if someone was going to be of perpetually low income, or if those fates were temporary, at least on their current trajectory and without significant work to change it. Most of the things I just knew were far more simple than that, though, and they bombarded me. A phone about to ring, a car about to break down, no specialty item in a certain store, so no reason to bother going, taking an umbrella despite a forecast of sunshine, the kids having a school trip rained out, basic stuff. I kept most of my knowings to myself, big or small, especially if it was bad, because I wasn't going to add negativity and fear to someone's burden. And anyway, what if I was wrong? Wasn't bad news a kind of curse that would only create more of what we don't want? I could not and would not take hope away from a person. I did keep track of the knowings internally, though, a kind of running mental list of things that came to me. I didn't want to write them down. Again, it was a sense of not wanting to make something more real. I often thought I should write something that I saw, felt, knew down, and then mail it to myself and use it as proof after the fact. But even that felt like it might tip the scale in the favor of the story. A kind of manipulation, if not outright playing God. I wasn't comfortable with that, be it good or bad. After the fact, I was more than happy to share, but then of course I had no real proof. I could tell the story, but it was up to the person listening to decide if I had known it in advance or was just making it up. Didn't matter what they decided. I knew when I was being honest with myself. That had to be enough. Even so, the more I talked about what was happening to me, and the more my gifts grew, the more words started to get around. I still wasn't interested in seeing dead people, but they came through anyway. I recall one Saturday night at a local riverfront bar being nudged, insistently, repeatedly, to talk to a handsome stranger next to me. I wondered if I was making it up, just looking for a hot date, but the voice was insistent. And I kept feeling a kind of push on my left shoulder. Doesn't look like the mystical type, I argued with my own head, but the voice was insistent, saying it was his dad. After a little small talk, I learned that he was an Irish lawyer, rode a motorcycle, called himself O'Connell. He used his last name as his first. And then I finally dove in. You're going to think I'm crazy, but I talked to the deceased. O'Connell looked at me like I was surely joking, then looked away and took a long, slow sip of his Scotch whiskey. Okay. There's this guy here, deceased, nudging me. He says he's your dad. O'Connell's face turned pale. Really? My dad died last year, about this time, in fact. So at least it could have been about him. He did die. Baby steps, Robin. Do you want to hear what he has to say? Definitely, he replied, taking more of a gulp this time, then turned to me and gave me his full attention. I started to listen in earnest. I asked Dad to give me something specific, not something just anyone would say. I didn't want to look like a fool, and I wasn't very experienced in relaying messages. His father pushed on me even more and whispered in my ear, "Tell him I like his dog." I argued with the dead guy silently, making it look like I was deep in meditation. Come on, you have to give me something more than that. Tons of people have dogs. That's all he would give me. Side note, I've since learned you aren't going to argue with dead people, and you shouldn't. They know way more about what they're trying to say than you do. So I know this is generic, I finally say out loud, but what your dad is saying, and he won't move off of it, I'll get more later maybe, but he says he likes your dog. Irish lawyer O'Connell's face drained of all color. I know a lot of people have dogs, I manage in a quasi-pre-apology. O'Connell half laughed, but his eyes were dead serious. My father liked my dog so much he stole him from me. He's come back to rub my nose in it one more time. Thank you, O'Connell's dad, I thought but did not say. O'Connell was all over me that night. Turns out mysticism is hot to some guys. He drove away alone, but I thought, that bike's pretty hot too. We dated a few times, then lost touch. But years later, O'Connell told me that our conversation changed the trajectory of his life. He became more open, more spiritual. Not long ago, I found out that he had passed on. Today, I imagine him sitting with his dad and his dog, smiling over my shoulder. I sense he's glad he got to make it into this story. O'Connell was just one person, one example, but there was no escaping it. The more I was willing to talk about my experiences, the more people wanted me to use my gifts. I began to get phone calls from total strangers. One was from a woman named Sunny who had recently found gifts of her own. When she called, she started to explain, but I suggested she tell me nothing in detail. Instead, we would trade our gifts as a way of getting to know each other with less bias. She agreed. We met a week or so later. Sunny's story was fascinating. An ordinary girl from a religious family, she had no knowledge of anything mystical until the day her father died. Holding his hand, she went with him to the other realms, in clear view of her many family members who were also present. Her knees buckled as she held on for what felt like her own life. She went only so far with him before they finally parted, and she fell fully to the floor as he went further into the light. What she saw changed her. Even so, she was new to this reality and found it bewildering. Could I help her understand? I would try. While my reading for her is and always will remain private, I recall with great clarity what she offered me in return. She opened with a little ceremony, lighting a candle and offering a prayer and a blessing. Side note, I've always felt a little lame to not have my own ritual for readings, but what I needed to say was always there on the tip of my tongue as soon as I went to the level where the greater voices could come through. I didn't have to think or do anything. I only had to speak. Later, I would learn the ritual helped others, but at the time, I was just doing whatever came naturally. Right there in her lovely living room, Sunny started looking and listening to the beyond. Within seconds, I saw her draw back from me dramatically. I've never seen guides like this. I think they are aliens? Yep, that would be for me, I replied with a laugh. What do they look like? Tall, white, but with weird faces. They're scaring me. She readjusted herself, shifting uncomfortably in her chair. Never seen anything like them, but let me listen. She took a moment. They're saying that they're sorry. Sorry for what? They're showing me that they created a world, like a globe. It's hard to tell. It was meant to be a living world, but it was an early, they're saying prototype. They didn't think they created life, so they threw it away. Now they're aware they did create life, that this world was alive when they threw it away. I wasn't following. I could not help myself. I felt into the field where I sensed they were, despite this being Sunny's lead. They felt masculine, like highly rational scientists conducting a serious experiment. Of the light, but these creatures were not like any I'd seen before. What does that have to do with me? I asked her to ask them. She was straining to see and hear. I'm not sure I'm getting this right, but no, yes. Yes, they're saying they're sorry. They said they owe you a world. Owe me? A world? Why? They say you are the world they created and threw away. The world they didn't think was alive, but clearly you are. I didn't say anything at first. I was flooded with feelings. Feelings I recognized. That thrown away sensation. Much the same as the underlying rejected feeling I'd experienced throughout my life. They're saying, yes, you're right, she confirmed. The feeling you're feeling right now, that's correct. It was nice to know at least someone from the other worlds knew how hard it had been. How lonely, how barren. But what was their intent? Were they like Elizabeth, just metaphors themselves? I tried to tune in, but I didn't get it. What does it mean, I asked her to ask them, that they owe me a world? I'm sorry, they aren't explaining further. She leaned back in her chair. Then, after having what looked like a second thought, leaned forward and cocked an ear to the ceiling, as if straining to listen a little more closely. I'm seeing something else now, a tall building, maybe in Chicago. You're going to be part of something really big. It's like a group of maybe 8 or 10 or 12 people, all very smart. You head up the group. I have to take care of 8 to 10 people? 12? I was instantly weary at the thought. Oh no, not at all. You have the idea, they're supporting you. They're there to take care of you. That sounded nice. When does this happen? I'm sorry, I don't know. I took another tack. How will I know this is real? It was a question I'd learned could be very helpful. In this world, I mean, is there any proof they could offer? They say if you want, they can turn your eyes completely white, but if you do, it will last the rest of your life. Seriously? White eyes? That's all they've got? No, thank you, I said, though I half wished it would happen just to prove it could. Everywhere I turned, I was short on actual provable proof. That, if it actually happened, would be pretty undeniable. I left Sunny as a new friend, but more baffled than when I walked in. White eyes? Some aliens owe me a world? Seriously. I looked to the heavens and told my 40 to 50 guides to please explain themselves. No reply, as usual. I would have forgotten the reading entirely, but the very next day, I was at a costume party at a local theme park with my kids. I stopped, stunned, seeing a young man with, no kidding, 100% white eyes. More than albino, white. I could not help but stare. I knew it was a nod from somewhere beyond. It took me a minute to take in his strange costume and realize he was probably wearing some kind of contact lenses. I'd never seen the kind before, but that was my best guess. Even so, seeing white eyes for the first time in my life the day after that story, what are the odds? As my kids lined up for a ride, I was only half present. Who were those aliens? What new world did they owe me? How could I get it? What would happen in Chicago? How would I meet the others that were meant to help me? I desperately wanted to live up to my every potential, and I was still utterly unsure about how to go about it. And this was going far out at this point. Was someone joking with me? Was I in some existential farce? As more and more people started to come to me asking for help, the very guru role I had insisted in my awakening that I would not play, I realized I really had no idea what the nature and extent of my gifts were, how they were to be used, or what good they might do. To explore this further, I was referred to a man named David Davis. While our time together would be short, his influence would powerfully shape my journey. I was about to meet my first real, really real, magician. Enter your labyrinth at BeWhoYouAre.com.